It was the year 1692, and the town of Salem was in the grip of a terrible panic. Accusations of witchcraft were being thrown around left and right, and anyone suspected of having any kind of connection to the supernatural was at risk of being accused and condemned to death. But the people of Salem had a secret weapon against the witches, a powerful coven of their own, led by a woman named Abigail Williams. Abigail was a force to be reckoned with a keen mind and an even keener sense of justice. She had sworn to protect the people of Salem from the evils of the supernatural, and had become something of a hero in the town. One night, as Abigail was walking home from a late meeting with her coven, she heard a strange noise coming from the woods. It was a low, mournful howl, like nothing she had ever heard before. As she got closer to the source of the sound, she could see a figure in the darkness, a woman, dressed in strange clothes and carrying a small child. Abigail approached the woman cautiously, but before she could say anything, the woman turned to her with a look of terror in her eyes.
"Please,"
she begged.
"you have to help me. They're after me."
Abigail looked around, but she couldn't see anyone else.
"Who's after you?"
she asked.
"The witches.
The woman replied.
They're trying to take my child. Please, you have to help me."
Abigail knew that she couldn't leave the woman and her child alone in the woods, so she offered to take them back to her own home. As they walked, Abigail learned that the woman's name was Mary, and that she had come from a place called the future. Abigail didn't understand what that meant, but she could tell that Mary was scared and desperate. When they arrived at Abigail's house, she gave Mary and her child a warm meal and a place to sleep. But even as she tended to them, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Mary's story didn't make sense, and there was something unsettling about the way she looked at Abigail, as though she knew something that Abigail didn't. The next morning, Abigail woke up to find that Mary and her child had vanished. There was no sign of a struggle, no indication of where they might have gone. Abigail searched the woods, but there was no trace of them. But as she was returning home, Abigail heard the same mournful howl that she had heard the night before. This time, it was joined by another sound. The sound of footsteps, coming closer and closer. Abigail turned to face the source of the noise, and what she saw chilled her to the bone. A group of figures was approaching her, dressed in strange clothes and carrying weapons that she didn't recognize. And at their head was Mary, her eyes filled with a strange, otherworldly light.
"You shouldn't have interfered,"
Mary said, her voice low and dangerous.
"You don't know what you're dealing with."
Abigail drew her own weapon, a small dagger that she kept at her side. She had faced many dangers before, but this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. The figures were moving closer, their eyes fixed on her with a hungry, malevolent gaze. But just as they were about to attack, Abigail heard another sound, the sound of galloping hooves. And then, out of nowhere, a figure appeared on a horse, dressed in armor and wielding a long sword. The figure on horseback charged towards the group of otherworldly figures, brandishing their sword with expert skill. Abigail watched in awe as the figure engaged in a fierce battle with the creatures, cutting through them with ease. As the last of the creatures fell to the ground, the figure turned to face Abigail. They lowered their visor, revealing a face that she recognized. It was none other than Benjamin Franklin, a scientist and inventor from Philadelphia.
"Abigail,"
he said, his voice muffled by the armor.
"you shouldn't have gotten involved in this. It's dangerous."
Abigail was confused.
"Benjamin, what's going on? Who are these creatures?"
Benjamin sighed.
"They are from another dimension, another time. They've come here to change history, to alter the course of events. We can't let that happen.
Abigail didn't know what to say. It was all too much to take in. Witches, creatures from other dimensions, a time traveler. But one thing was clear. She had to help Benjamin stop them. Together, Abigail and Benjamin traveled through time and space, battling the creatures wherever they appeared. They fought their way through the forests of the past, the streets of the present, and the ruins of the future. But with each victory, the creatures grew stronger, more numerous. And Abigail began to realize that they were not just fighting to preserve history, they were fighting to save their very souls. As they faced the final battle in a desolate wasteland at the end of time, Abigail and Benjamin stood side by side, weapons at the ready. They could feel the weight of centuries of history bearing down on them, the hopes and dreams of countless generations resting on their shoulders. And then, as the creatures swarmed around them, Abigail saw something that gave her hope. In the distance, she could see the faint outline of a figure, a woman holding a child in her arms. It was Mary, the woman from the future. And as Abigail watched, she saw Mary lift the child up, high into the air. And then she disappeared, leaving behind a bright, pulsing light. The creatures shrieked in pain as the light engulfed them, and Abigail and Benjamin fought with renewed vigor. And as they emerged victorious, Abigail knew that something had changed. The world was different now, in ways that she could not yet understand. But one thing was certain. They had won. They had saved the world from the creatures, and from the dark forces that threatened to engulf it. And as she and Benjamin rode off into the sunset, Abigail knew that she had been a part of something greater than herself. Something that would be remembered for generations to come.